Hi, I'm Vera.
And I'm Florida Spaghetti, and we like to go on cycling trips and have been doing so for over a dozen years.
In this video, we would like to share some of the memories we have on a trip we did in 2014. And this wasn't just any trip, but the first half of our big summer tour. Starting in Switzerland, close to the French border in the small medieval village of Saint-Ursanne, and then crossing France from east to west, all the way to the end of the world, or rather the small town of Plounéventer in Finisterre, to visit friends whom we had known from our usual summer destination in the south of France.
After that, we crossed France again, heading southeast to rejoin our friends, and then cycling back to Geneva, where we would fetch a train home. In total, we cycled 2,800 kilometers in 7.5 weeks, with 2 weeks resting.
As we have so many impressions we would like to share with you, we divide this trip up into 2 parts, and we'll show you the second part from Brittany to the south of France in a coming video.
Anyway, this was the second really long trip we did after cycling from Switzerland to England the prior year, and then going to the same destination as we had this time around. We thought it would be a comparable journey, with the exception that we had far more experience and we were better equipped for the challenges that awaited us. Or so we thought, at least.
Yes, because regardless of all that we had learned out of our misfortunes and mistakes from our previous expeditions, we would still encounter a lot of new situations that would put us to the test. In the end, we had not only discovered all sorts of historic monuments and beautiful landscapes, but also a lot about ourselves. And with further insights, we were able to use our experiences to refine the way we go about cycling on later trips. At any rate, every cycling trip is unique in its own way, and you never know what may surprise you next.
Absolutely not. So I guess it was probably a bit naive of us to assume that we would arrive at our destination in roughly the same time. It had taken us 12 days to reach England, which was a 1,000-kilometre journey, not including the crossing the Channel from Calais to Dover. But we hadn't reckoned on the extra 100 kilometres taking us an additional 5 days. But as this would only become obvious after the fact, we started out in good spirits with lovely weather. The reason for our delay would reveal itself pretty soon though, as we will explain in the course of the slideshow.
Yes. So, as we explained, we started out in Saint-Ursanne, which took us about 2 hours to reach by train.
The picturesque village is located in the middle of the Jura mountain range. As you can see, we have perfect weather to begin with.
If we would have started our journey at the beginning of the 19th century, we would actually be in France and not in Switzerland. From 1793 to 1815, this region belonged to a French department called the Mont-Terrible, which speaks for itself. No wonder they became part of the Swiss Confederation.
Although only 670 people live here, the streets were full of tourists on this sunny day.
Under the monastery lay the bones of the name-giver of the settlement, the hermit Ursinus, who settled here at the beginning of the 7th century.
However interesting the history of Saint-Ursanne may be, that wasn't the reason we chose it as a starting point, but rather its close proximity to the French border in La Motte.
And that it is situated in the Dour Valley, so we could follow the river and glide down the gradual descent, guaranteeing an easy start to our long journey.
Approaching Montbéliard, we were pleasantly surprised by the good cycling infrastructure which led us through the suburbs up to the Rhine-Rhone Canal. If you saw our last video, you will recall that we passed through here just 2 months before on our way to Besançon.
We crossed this path and followed the Canal de la Haute-Saône à Montbéliard, and actually managed to get one of the very rare pictures with both of us cycling.
Which is why we have shown this multiple times before. So, if you saw our last 2 videos, it will come as no surprise that this citadel was also designed by Vauban, who was responsible for engineering the fortresses that protected France in the 17th century.
This one is situated in Belfort, a town of 45,000 inhabitants, and the last major town we would see for several days.
Lovers of Trivial Pursuit may find it interesting that Belfort is the capital of the smallest and youngest département in France and carries the number 90, making an exception to the alphanumerical system used for the other departments of mainland France.
Apart from the citadel, which we had not visited, the market hall is certainly another highlight of the town. It was built in 1905.
Everything was really working out well. This was such a delightful ride in gorgeous surroundings.
With all the cycle paths that led our way, we didn't have a care in the world.
And to top it off, we even found a really peaceful campsite in the middle of nowhere, not believing our luck.
But I guess we had relied on that just a bit too much, and it wasn't going to last. The color of the sky quickly changed from blue to gray. There was a significant drop in temperature. The wind picked up, and it had started to rain.
Initially, we didn't think too much of it. It hadn't been the first time we cycled through rain, and it wouldn't be the last. A day or two of rain wouldn't be so bad.
After spending a full week of slow progress fighting a strong and never-ending headwind along wide but wet country lanes, we arrived in Troyes. The football stadium with the contemporary design, a sure sign that we had returned to civilization. Now we only hoped that the rain would finally cease.
But the artwork we found on this wall didn't seem very promising.
The stadium was the only really modern building we came across. As Troyes is abundant with history and is full of elaborately constructed half-timbered houses, most of them dating back to the 16th century.
The large historic centre of the town might give the impression that Troyes is a big massive city, but it is smaller than we had thought, with just over 60,000 inhabitants. However, the rich architectural heritage displays the past importance and wealth generated over the centuries, as Troyes is situated in the heart of the Champagne, home to the famous expensive beverage. A complete system of units to measure the weight of gold and other precious metals established in England in the 15th century, the Troyes weight, is in fact named after the town, suggesting what that champagne was traded for.
We had wanted to trade in the rain for sunshine, but we didn't get much out of the deal. Sunshine was still rare, but at least the rain had stopped.
We crossed past here a year earlier, passing from north to south after escaping Britain. And as you might recall if you saw that video, the weather had been really good. After having a break inside the walls of this ruined church, I realized that I had misplaced that hideous safety vest. Good riddance to that, even if that had not been my intention.
Day 7 of consecutive rain on the eve of the French national holiday. The campsite manager seemed really excited about this and invited us to join him in the local festivities. And we heartily agreed. But we're not really expecting more than music and wine in the small village of 330 inhabitants. So we met up with him later and left the camera in the tent.
Which was stupid, because we would have really liked taking pictures of the very unique show that we were about to witness. The man didn't lead us to a party, but to a makeshift open theatre made out of haystacks and bustling with people, many of them dressed in costume and some even riding horses, centering around the stage with a line of wooden houses, setting the scene where a legendary drama had taken place 200 years before.
The story told of when a group of Cossacks had tried to capture the village whilst fighting against Napoleon's armies, although the Cossacks had promised not to use any force. The villagers were reluctant to provide refuge, and the unwelcome guests peacefully set up camp outside the settlement and stayed there for the coming weeks. With time, they even became friendly with each other, often gathering and sharing meals. So it was inevitable that one of the soldiers ended up having a romantic affair with a young native woman.
So then the villagers turned to violence themselves and massacred the whole group. But it was said that the village had been cursed for this malicious act, and that afterwards the village remained shrouded in a cover of fog with the sun not appearing again for 6 months. This left us a bit wondering if we ourselves had been cursed, and how long it would take for summer to finally return again.
But as we all lit up torches after this spectacle and marched off to a nearby lake to watch a firework display lasting a full half hour, the bad spell seemed to have got broken.
The following day, the sun actually reappeared. Even though we still had a steady headwind slowing us down considerably. It had taken us 9 days to cross half of the country, much longer than we had thought it would, and the wind was getting rather annoying as we crossed the plains of the Beauce.
We caught up with an abandoned railway line that we followed for many miles.
This led us to the town of Alençon, which, despite some rather interesting modern and historic architecture, seemed eerily deserted, like an open-air museum that had already shut for the evening. It is a prime example of relatively unknown small towns that dot Europe and tell tales of past fortunes that would somehow deserve much more attention. Alençon was once well known for its lace.
Was our gateway to Normandy, which is notorious for bad weather. But ironically, things were looking really bright for us. the cries of lapwings and gulls accompanied by a strong scent of salt in the air were a sure sign we were getting close to the coast, which we were really looking forward to. But the open ocean was nowhere to be seen across the bay of shallow water, meaning we had arrived when the tide was low. Instead, a monumental building appeared on the horizon.
Le Mont-Saint-Michel, which is in fact an island with a total of 60 buildings. It won't come as a surprise that this striking piece of architecture attracts a lot of tourists, but we were fortunate enough to get a spot at the nearby campsite and visit the insides of this extraordinary site in the evening, after most of the crowd had already left.
One could be mistaken into believing there was a profound reason for building such a massive abbey on a tiny rock, reflecting strategic importance. But it turns out that it may just have been the result of inducing hallucinogenic substances or some other psychotic event, as the legend might suggest. Back in the year 708, a certain Aubert, the bishop of Avranches, had a vision in which the archangel Michael had instructed him to build an oratory on this very island. After first neglecting this divine message, Michael revisited Aubert a second and a third time, getting increasingly impatient and ultimately poking him in the head and ordering him to complete the task. So Aubert was left with no choice, much to our delight, as we climbed the stairs and entered into a world of beauty and enchantment.
The heavens hadn't been kind to us, though, and the next day was followed by rain and thunderstorms. So we took a break and spent the afternoon retrieving our wet things out of the puddle that had formed around our tent and resettling on a pitch that was on higher ground. The bad weather was starting to cause some serious frustration, but we got compensated by a stunningly beautiful sunset when we revisited the island later in the evening. But the next day, the rain returned to haunt us once again. We were well behind schedule, but at least we had finally reached Brittany, and as our friends were waiting and were soon wanting to leave to go on holiday themselves, time was running out. So, contrary to our plan of continuing along the scenic coastline, we chose a more direct itinerary inland.
making good ground that day, we arrived at campsite in the sweet town of Blanquois. We were again in good spirits, spoke to a Scotsman who was also travelling by bike, and looking forward to getting some food at the village festival that was going to take place that evening. The clouds had finally dissipated, and the forecast promised sunshine and even an unexpected heatwave. But things got heated a bit quicker than we had expected.
Yes, as the village festivities progressed after nightfall, a series of events cascaded, putting us into a state of panic, starting with a bang, fireworks illuminating the sky, and followed by observing the cinders gently falling from the night sky, slowly descending, giving off a mesmerizing glow, and then all of a sudden realizing that, hang on, wait a minute, isn't that falling down right over our tent?
We ran as fast as our legs could carry us, only to discover the Scotsman muttering swear words and scrambling to cover up his tent, which already had holes in it. We ran over to our tent, hastily pulled all the bags out, grabbed all the corners and ran with it as far as we could, out of the danger zone, leaving a trail of stuff behind us that had been neatly prepared for the night. Incredible! We didn't lose anything, nor was our tent damaged in any way. So in the end, we were actually pretty lucky.
After a full day of cycling, passing by the grey stone buildings and mellow landscapes that are a hallmark of this beautiful region, we were excited to see the first sign marked with our destination, Plounéventer, where our friends had been awaiting us, getting anxious if we would ever make it.
After a decent meal and a good night's rest, we finally had time to spend a day relaxing at the sea, bringing this first part of an exceptional journey to an end. And although we still had a long way in front of us, there had already been much we had learned. For example,
Number 1. Never cycle across France from east to west if you don't want to have a constant headwind.
Number 2, be careful where you set up your tent, because you never know what can happen, be that fireworks or waking up in a puddle.
Number 3. Having a good tent and waterproof equipment really paid off, as we surprisingly managed to keep all of our valuables like documents, electronics, clothes and sleeping bags dry during the whole time. That stopped the rain from ruining everything completely and bringing our journey to a halt.
But as this had been such a super intense ride, we were both rather overwhelmed after arriving and having mixed feelings. On the one hand, we were extremely proud of ourselves for overcoming all the difficulties and setbacks we had encountered on the way.
And yet, these had somewhat compromised our enjoyment. On the other hand, we had been intrigued by the many sights and sounds and magical encounters making it all part of the experience.
But we didn't have much time to process our thoughts and feelings, as this was only an intermediate stage on our way back south. And we were desperate for a Mediterranean climate. And so were our friends, who we would later see again. Just that they soon left with the car and arrived a fortnight before we did on our bikes. But then again, they also didn't get to see as much on the way and weren't able to make a video out of their journey like we did.
So, I hope you join us again on the second part of our summer tour, where we actually found the sun as we set off towards the hills and mountains of 1,000 Springs and beyond, discovering many further astounding sights and landscapes.
Yes, it was really fun making this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button.
And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on the next one. So, until then, thanks for watching, and bye-bye.